Welcome to the Ageless Warrior Lab. I'm BJJ Black Belt and Dirty Dozen member Dave Meyer, here to draw wisdom from Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and the martial arts and explore how it applies to success in business, relationships, your long-term health, and making the most out of your life. What you're about to hear is an interview I recorded with my friend Dan Millman. He is a world champion gymnast, a gymnastics coach, a martial arts instructor, an author. He is known for his books Way of the Peaceful Warrior, No Ordinary Moments, The Life You Were Born to Live, and many others. He's inspired millions with his books and teachings on personal growth and spiritual development, which he shares through his writings and speaking engagements and workshops. I consider it a real honor to have him as a friend, and I hope that you will enjoy the conversation as much as I did. Hello, Dan, and thank you for joining me.
Hey, David, I should offer a caveat that we're friends, so we're familiar with each other, and it's going to be a fun conversation, I have a feeling.
Well, I always enjoy every conversation I have with you. I feel very, very honored to get any time with you. Yes, we're friends, but I'm an admirer of yours, a beneficiary of your lifetime of writings and teaching, and I'm just overjoyed to be able to get a chance to talk to you about that now and share that with my audience. If you have not yet encountered Dan's work, we'll have links in the show notes, but you need to read his books. Trust me, you will be glad you did. The first book, Dan, of yours I encountered, like many people, was Way of the Peaceful Warrior. It came to me at a very important time in my life, transformational, as the book cover says it does. It has this way of changing lives. I'm wondering, you have made a career out of what I assume is your passion, and I'm wondering if you have any thoughts to share with people. I hear from friends a lot who admire how I too have worked on something I care about in my life, was able to find a way to turn it into a living. Wondering if you have any thoughts or advice on someone who maybe similarly would like to turn their passion into something that can actually earn a living.
Well, it's good leapfrogging off the theme of your show, Ageless Warrior, since I'm approaching my 80th year. And though you're a professional, I would consider, and I'm just an amateur, more of a dilettante, an appreciator of martial arts. So that's a great place to begin because, we'll go bounce back and forth between the themes of martial arts, the philosophies, and daily life. But as far as a trail of breadcrumbs or a model, a role model, I do have some thoughts. I told my daughters when they were young this idealistic advice to do what you love and get someone to pay you for it. And that's, I think, good advice in terms of pursuing one's calling, one's mission, one's interests, or even hobbies, playing guitar, doing needlework, whatever it is. I emphasize, as you know, the idea of a career, which is a way we make an income. The primary purpose, as has been true since ancient times, primitive times, where people traded one product or something. They made an arrowhead and traded it for a service. So commerce, interactions in that way. And if someone says, well, yeah, but I love my work, there's so many side benefits. What Jerry Brown, way back when in the 60s, used to call psychic income. That's all great. But if we weren't making any money at what we do for a living, then we'd have to find something else. So there's that, the career. And the calling is what we love to do with our discretionary time. And it's wonderful if we can combine the two or have them separate and celebrate one on our off hours and then focus on our work. But in terms of finding our ideal work, something that's appropriate, I believe that each of us can make a good living doing what we enjoy, or at least find suitable and fitting for our talents and so on, while serving other people. I think if we aim for service, providing a service, no matter how humble, I think that is a key and the most satisfying aspect of the work we do in the world. And mine has been a winding path, just a winding path. As a kid, I discovered a trampoline at a summer camp. I was about 10 years old, and I just loved something about jumping up and down. Other kids would come and try a few moves and then leave. But I stayed with it. I just was fascinated with trying these physical puzzles and skills to figure out how you can do these various movements. And who knew that that was going to lead to eventually a scholarship to a university, a world championship, and blah, blah, blah. And eventually a coaching position at Stanford University and uh, all that followed. Couldn't have guessed that. So I did kind of follow my heart. But so much of this requires a degree of self knowledge, which I did not have, let me rush to say, when I was a young man. In fact, it can take years or decades to develop a real sense of what are my talents? What am I good at and not good at? What are my values? That's a big one. And what are my interests? Rather than doing something other people think I should do or I think I should do, rather than what am I really interested in? So, all these things, I think, take a degree of self awareness, self knowledge. If we don't have that, and all of us have had this experience probably, we end up making the right choice for the wrong person, the one we thought we were in a relationship or in a career. So we each have to find our own path. I like to remind people we cannot lose our way, even though it feels like it sometimes, because wherever we step, the path is going to appear and we learn lessons along the way. So that's a long response, but that's what came up for me.
You know, you make a really good point about how we change in our lives. I think people go to college or something when they're young, and there's this belief that you're going to pick a profession and that's what you're going to stick with for your whole life. And you don't know yourself at that time. And I think your point that you can't get lost because there'll always be a path that appears, I think that that's true. I think if people are willing to reassess where you are now, who you are now, and is what you're doing fulfilling to you now? It may have been the right thing that you chose to do 20 years ago or 5 years ago, but is it what you want to be doing now? And I think when it comes to being able to have a meaningful career, a meaningful life, I'm sure everybody would love to, I don't know, be Mother Teresa or cure cancer or do something that would be very, very meaningful. But we need people to work at a gas station. We need people to work at a bank. We need people to grow our food. And so I think that there may be sometimes some people can work for a passion that makes the world a better place, and that's their full-time job. But I think for most people, they can do meaningful work that they enjoy, that brings in money, and that hopefully they can do it in a way that enriches people's lives. And there's also time for volunteering. Your profession does not have to be the thing that is your passion, so long as your profession doesn't take up all your time.
Right.
I know many people who are professionals. They, reasonably enjoy their job, but then they have a whole life of volunteering where they really are scratching that itch of helping the world or something like that.
Exactly, exactly. And it was Mother Teresa herself who said that we can't all do great things, but we can do small things with great love or devotion. In fact, I remember standing on a railroad platform in Japan several decades ago, but I never forgot this. There was a little man there, and his job apparently was to polish the uprights on an endless railing along the length of the station. And he was carefully polishing each upright, one, then the next, and looking at it and checking it to see if it was shining and clean. Then he went on to the next one. He struck me like he was a Zen master. It was a meditative activity for him. Now, no one would call that necessarily creative work or even satisfying, but for him, he had made the most of that quote unquote humble occupation as a way of life. There's a saying in Japan that how you do anything is how you do everything. How you serve tea or drink tea probably reflects your approach to living. And that man, I think, was living an impressive life for me, from my view. And by the way, one of the central tenets, as you probably know, of this approach to living, I call the Peaceful Warrior's Way, is that there is no best book, no best job or career, no best hobby or calling, no best philosophy or religion or diet or system of exercise or martial art. There's only the best for each of us at a given time of our life. So, as you pointed out, what might have worked 5 years ago or 10 years ago may not work for us now. The ground has shifted beneath us, life changes. I've heard that young people today growing up, like my grandkids, maybe working at jobs that haven't even been invented yet.
Hmm. Yeah. You've written a lot of books. How many is it? 18, now 19?
Well, I counted 18. My latest one's just a compilation that I edited for fun. Yeah.
But I know at least some of them are addressing this sort of the life you were born to live, actualizing. When I think of you, I think of you as a master of taking wisdom and distilling it or making it understandable to the average person. Taking concepts that are important, world changing concepts, ways of being in the world, and making it extremely accessible. And that's to me what your books do, whether it's a story that you're telling or whether it's practical life advice that you're giving. That to me is an area of mastery for you. And that's why I'm hoping that my friends who are listening will check that out because it certainly helped me along in my life.
Well, thank you. My reality way back when was I was very much into self improvement as a young man. And not just the usual things of, I mean, I learned speed reading and I took courses for memorization and so on. I learned elements of the martial arts. I learned juggling. I did acrobatics and gymnastics. I played guitar a little bit. So the point is, I was really interested in improving myself in these various ways. And one day, I don't remember exactly when it was, or maybe it was a realization over time. I said, no matter how much I improve myself, only one person benefits. But if I could somehow influence other people, that made my life more meaningful, help their lives to improve. And that was when I found a kind of calling. I wanted to influence people in a positive way, hopefully by example. But I had no clue at that time how I might do that. Literally, it never occurred to me to write a book. Only over time, when I was writing a series of gymnastics articles for a magazine, that they started stacking up this series of articles. And I went, wow, that almost looks like a book manuscript. And that was the first time it occurred to me. Because, like most people, I found a 10-page paper in school intimidating. So eventually, over about a 7-year period, that material took shape and I wrote it and rewrote it and rewrote it. And it wasn't like some brilliant strategy. I think I'll write a book containing bits of wisdom. I'd read at the same time what Aldous Huxley used to call the perennial wisdom, wherever I could find it. And I know we share this interest. Where can I find really in depth wisdom that seems true in all times and places? And so I read, for example, Carlos Castaneda. Some people remember his work, best-selling works, but it was out in the Nagual and it was dealing with mezcalito and peyote. And Carlos Castaneda, the author, described it as a true autobiographical account, which it wasn't. But nonetheless, they were very evocative books, well written and really, really intriguing. But at the time, I said, you can't go to the desert in Sonora and take drugs necessarily to experience this or that or have breakthroughs. You could learn wisdom from anybody, even an old service station attendant, which, of course, Way of the Peaceful Warrior was adapted to film in 2006, and Nick Nolte played the old service station attendant, who I called Socrates, because the old guy I actually met about 3 in the morning on one occasion reminded me of the Greek sage for some reason. And so I ended up drawing upon that character in Way of the Peaceful Warrior. So it wasn't some brilliant strategy where I wanted to convey wisdom, but somehow it took shape. And it was what I wanted to share. I thought a few college students might like it because they could relate to it. It was about a young college gymnast, me. And yet it's still going strong. I can't believe it. This was 1980. So, do the math. It's still going strong because somehow the book captured people's attention and they could relate to it. And that's why I guess it's become my best known book. I didn't write another book for 10 years, David. I said what I had to say. And yet, 10 years later, I met another mentor of 4 mentors. I spent 20 years in-depth preparation, working with 4 radically different mentors. Um, I called the professor, the guru, the warrior priest, and the sage. And when I met the warrior priest, there was so much new information. I was so excited about it. I wanted to share it in my own way. So I ended up writing a second book, which was again in the form of a narrative, a novel, a story, conveying information to the readers. But then people said, well, Dan, I was inspired. I loved your first 2 books, but how do you apply this stuff to everyday life? So that's when I wrote a book called No Ordinary Moments, A Peaceful Warrior's Guide. It was more of a guidebook to daily life. And so each book organically just came about. I never wrote a book just to have a new book out. They were like planes ready to take off a runway, like it's my turn now. So when they appeared, I ended up writing them. Now I'm essentially retired from long form book writing, but yes, there's certain satisfaction in my case having done writing. I encourage everyone to write their own memoir, to write their story for relatives, for friends, for their children or grandchildren or nieces, nephews, because it's a way to look back on your life and it's a valuable experience in itself. Whether or not it gets published, though anybody can self-publish today, easy to do. A digital book costs just about nothing, um, and one can do that. But it's a tough market because it's easy to get published. You can do it yourself, but it's very difficult to market and to sell one's work today, to rise above the noise. There's so many distractions, attention spans shortening, as you know. So, a friend of mine said it beautifully. He said, used to be everyone wanted to get up on stage and perform. Now everyone's on stage and there's nobody in the audience.
That's right. That's a very good way of putting it.
Yeah.
And of course, your life has involved, as I know because I experienced this personally, not just your writings, but also hands on courses that you've taught, which have been super amazing for people who've had the benefit of attending those. And I actually believe you even offer some consultations, personal consultations people can schedule with you too. But I just wanted to note, because you talked about your early gymnastics career, that as you mentioned, you're nearing 80 years old now and you're in tremendously great shape. I have seen you teach and hold what looks to me like a perfect handstand for minutes at a time. So clearly, you've kept your body in good shape, you've kept yourself in good health, and I hope that that continues for many, many more years to come. I'm wondering, are there things from your sports and martial arts experience, skills that you developed on the mat in both cases, that carry into your life that have influenced how you approach your life?
Well, returning to that idea that how you do anything is how you do everything, I think our time on the mat or on the floor or practicing a martial art or musical instrument is like a master metaphor. It can teach us a lot about our process. I like to say that I've never seen a dumb athlete. Many people have the stereotype of the dumb jock in their mind, but there are athletes who are really focused on performance, but they're not academically motivated. They don't necessarily like abstract thoughts or philosophy. They like practical things. But I've never seen actually a dumb athlete, because when we train our physical body, we're training our nervous system. We're learning how to relax, to breathe deeply, to focus. We're learning how you learn step by step by step. We're learning about process, about the laws of reality. In fact, we're learning spiritual or universal laws through our practice, and that carry us consciously or unconsciously through life. It's been distilled down to character building, but really there's a lot more to it than that. We learn to deal with fear, certainly on the mat, in grappling arts and so on.
But I would imagine in gymnastics as well, you're doing some pretty dangerous things.
Yeah, gymnastics is a warrior sport like martial arts because you can break your neck, you can get seriously injured, where in golf or tennis, it's less likely, for example, or swimming. It's less likely to get seriously injured or to die. So there are certain elements of warrior sports where you do deal with fear. And that always brings up my favorite quote by boxing coach Customato, who said, heroes and cowards feel exactly the same fear. They just respond differently, which brings back the emphasis of this approach I teach, which is based on what we do over time, not what we're feeling or thinking necessarily, not to dismiss our thoughts or feelings. Feelings can be very important. They can teach us things, but our lives are shaped by what we do and have done over time that brought us to this present moment. So elder people like myself need more exercise than younger people. Younger people are already vital, active. They move around, they play, they run, they jump. It's hard to keep up with my grandkids. But elder people need more exercise. They need to spend more time doing it. They don't realize that. They say, well, I can wind down now. I'm older. I'm getting on in years. But you have to work at it. You absolutely do. It's just a different kind of exercise, not as percussive or poundy or intense necessarily, but more moderated. And I don't even want to begin with the exercises I do every day. Different things, of course, not the same every day. And that's helped me to stay in good shape. Yeah. So I recommend that to anyone. Jack LaLanne, some people remember Jack LaLanne. He was one of the first guys on national TV teaching exercise to people in their living room at home. I once worked out with him at Santa Monica Beach. I was a young gymnast and he was there. We did some handstand push-ups together. I was about 18 at the time. But I remember Jack saying, I really don't like to exercise, but I love the results. Because people assume, oh, you fitness guys, you love to do that. Not necessarily, but it's that whole thing of just do it. And the results are really beneficial.
Of course, you're further along this path of life than I am. I'm 63, but I do believe use it or lose it. I know in yoga, they say you're as young as your spine is flexible. It's all there for you just naturally when you're a kid. You have your flexibility, you have energy. Kids run from the car to the store. They just run everywhere. But I do think as we get older, there has to be an intentionality to keeping your body flexible, use it or lose it. You mentioned the warrior aspects to certain sports. And I want to talk to you about some of the real key concepts that I think about all the time and that I know that you have a lot to say on. One of the things I note that I love about my martial arts fighting is when you are engaged in a match, whether it's just normal sparring with your partners or certainly if it's an actual competition, one's mind does not wander. You are very much in the moment because you're called to be in the moment. I don't ever see anyone grappling in jiu-jitsu and then stopping and saying, oh, I forgot to call my wife, or I really just had an idea, nothing like that. You are extremely in the moment. And I think that's one of the things that attracts people to martial arts or to pursuits like gymnastics or to tennis or to any sport that's calling your attention to the present moment, because this is something you're doing. And if your attention drifts, you might get injured. Downhill skiing, whatever.
Right.
And this interplay between being in the present moment and reasonable reflection on what just happened in your past or planning for what you're doing in the future. This is just a very difficult concept, I guess, for me. This tugging between, oh, I want to be in the present moment. And yet here I find myself thinking about something in the future. Maybe it's causing stress. And then coming back to, as you said, like no ordinary moments, I try to remind myself if I need to be thinking about the future right now, like if there's something I need to be thinking about, then feel the stress. I try not to feel the stress, but I'm actively saying, I want to now think about this thing I need to do, and I'm now going to plan it out. I'm going to think about it. But almost never is that what's happening. It's just my mind has drifted off. There's a competition coming up. I have one coming up in a few weeks. Maybe now I'm feeling stress. And I ask myself, what's wrong with this moment that I have to ignore it and take my attention to something else that's causing me stress? What's wrong with this moment? That's how I try to deal with that. But I'd love anything you have to say about this paradox, let's call it, of wanting and needing to be present with the only thing that's true, which is this moment, and yet our very human and quite useful sometimes ability to just have our thoughts drift into the past or drift into the future.
Sure. Well, let me start with the story. This is a true story. I was about 22, 23 years old, a young coach at Stanford University in gymnastics, and I was teaching gymnastics classes as well. And I heard there was a knock on my office door early one morning, and it was a Zen master, Roshi, in his robes. And he asked if possibly his meditation group could sit in a circle in the mornings. And the gym wasn't being used in the mornings. I said, sure. I said, I can join you. And he said, of course, of course. So I started doing Zen and reading about Zen as well for background. So I was a little bit unusual. I had that reputation. In fact, when the team from the University of Southern California came up to compete at Stanford, the coach took me aside just before the meet started and said, Dan, I heard a rumor that you had your gymnasts meditate before a competition. And at that time, it was really fringe. That was really outlier type of behaviors. Yoga wasn't even popular at all, just a few hippies that did yoga. I said to Jack Beckner, he was an Olympian, he had been an Olympian. I said, Jack, no, I'd never have my team meditate before a competition. I have them meditate during the competition. And, that kind of stopped his mind for a moment. But the fact is, we normally think of meditation as something one does in a stable sitting position. But eventually we open our eyes and get back to daily life. Most of our day is not spent in a lotus position. So the point is to create a moving meditation of our everyday life, to generalize that idea of being aware. That brings up this question of mindfulness. It's become a thing. Oh, I practice mindfulness, as if that's one-stop spiritual shopping and for development. But really, all mindfulness means is paying attention to the present moment without judgments. And if we are paying attention, if we're sitting quietly with our eyes closed or half closed, we call it mindfulness meditation, where we're attending to the various thoughts that arise, which they naturally do. It's not about shutting them off. It's just watching them, notice them passing, seeing the illusory nature of this random thoughts, much like dreams, arising and passing, and our emotions that change and images that come to us and ideas and all that. You just sit. That's called mindfulness meditation. And more important, because we spend most of our day doing it, is being mindful of our every action. Walking, breathing, moving around, whatever we do, doing the laundry. I just, before our interview, put the dishes away from the dishwasher carefully and mindfully. So that's the idea. People ask me all the time, Dan, how can I live in the present moment? The fact is, our physical body, this body lives only in the present moment, moment to moment to moment. It's here now. But our mind or our attention drifts from what we call the past, which is only a set of neural impulses we call memory. I remember this, I remember that. Oh, I wish I hadn't done that or had done that. Or into the future, which is our imagination. We project our imagination. Now, imagination and memory are wonderful human gifts. We can learn from the past and remember it and so on, and we can imagine or plan our day, for example. Though, as you pointed out, the day rarely turns out to be what we had planned. But so these things are both realistic. However, we have a fundamental human error of mistaking memory and imagination for reality. This is the moment of reality, now and now and now. That's the moment of sanity. The rest is just imagination and memory, regrets, anxieties, past and future. And so it's not a matter of learning how to live in the present. The body naturally does that. It's becoming the body. It's moving as the body. And as you well know, and when you're in training or a competition, you are definitely not wondering about what you had for breakfast that day or thinking about it, because In a way, it's a beginner's form of meditation because it's like meditate or die. When I'm flying off the high bar, it's either pay attention or die. So in a way, the warrior type activities make that demand to focus. And that's how we can learn it and we can generalize it into our everyday life. So those are my thoughts. By the way, one reason to do it is you want a quiet mind, focus on the present, what's right in front of you, because we can't think about anything in the present moment. Anything we think about or ruminate on is going to be from what we call the past or the future. Wandering, illusory ideas, which rarely turn out the way we think. So, in the present moment, if I were to take a set of keys and toss them to you right now, and you reach for them to catch them, you wouldn't be thinking about what you're going to do tomorrow or what you did yesterday. You'd be just like a cat-like awareness reaching for the keys to catch them instinctively, back in the body, back in the body.
You know, you make an interesting point that I've meditated for many, many years.
Mhm.
My parents got me into transcendental meditation and yoga back again when it was very not normal and cool. And I feel very fortunate for having had parents that were exploring their world. So this was in the 70s. But in sitting meditation, it's done differently. You know, Zen meditation could be you'd be focusing on a candle, or in transcendental meditation, you have a mantra, a sound you're repeating in your mind to yourself silently. But in insight meditation, vipassana, things like that, frequently you're at least starting by observing your breath, which I think is just a really great thing. Personally, I've come to prefer meditation where I'm paying attention to my body as opposed to a mantra, a thought that's going, because I like connecting to my body. And I feel like the breath is both vital, like it's the one thing that if you don't do, you'll be dead within a few minutes, as opposed to food or anything else like that. And it's always with you. It's such that interesting intersection of something that you can choose to do. I can say breathe deep and you will breathe deep and you can control your breath. And yet when you're asleep, when you're unconscious, your breath is still, it's this intersection between the conscious mind, the unconscious mind. So breath is an amazing thing. And so naturally, when we're doing meditation and trying to be in the present moment, frequently we're focusing on the breath, and that gives the mind something to focus on. And then, of course, it drifts and you bring it back. But what I hear you saying is most of your time is not spent in that state. And if you can bring that bodily awareness to your daily activities of being aware as you're putting away the dishes, as you said, that's a way of bringing that kind of attention to your body, which is in the present moment, to help you throughout your daily waking life to be as much as possible in the present moment. So I think that's a really interesting connection.
Well, David, you brought up earlier the idea that I sometimes do one-on-one consultations with people. And there was a young man who came up to me after a talk I gave at his college. And he said, Dan, you mentioned that you do consultations, but what can you tell a poor college student for $1? And he handed me his dollar. And I told him 6 words that were a lifetime practice for him. And those 6 words were here and now, breathe, and relax. That's almost the whole ball game. If we can master that idea of focusing on the present moment of reality, handling what's in front of us, being less preoccupied with past and future, so attention doesn't wander around all the time. But when we need to plan our day, again, we can do that or remember something, that's fine. At the same time, you brought up the idea of stress briefly. You'd mentioned stress. And what I was giving him was an antidote to stress. All of us have felt stress. Stress happens when the mind resists what is. Whatever's arising is arising. That's what's happening. That's reality. And the more we learn, as you know, from your practice, your training in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you go, oh, I didn't know he was going to do this. Oh, this is a rough situation. Oh my God, what am I going to do about this? Well, life is such a problem, rather than, oh, this is what's happening. Now, how can I respond and remain flexible and flow with it? And so that's a massive teaching. So the idea, not resisting what arises, because we automatically do that, because most of us like to play God. We like to say, this should be, This shouldn't be, like we know, right? Rather than this is what is, and let's deal with it and flow with it. So the idea of stress is with us all the time. If we don't care about anything, then we never feel stress. And there's some books on that topic, and people aspire to that. But most of us do care about our loved ones, about our job, our work, our sport, whatever it is. So stress is going to be part of our lives, but it's not the stress that hurts us. Even though there may be books or magazine articles, stress is bad for your immune system, blah, blah, blah. But really, it's not the stress. That's just an abstract idea. It's a feeling in the body of pressure or whatever. In different cases, different people experience it differently. But it's the tension that goes along with a stressful situation. And as you know in the martial arts, as soon as you tense up, you're screwed basically. So you have to stay relaxed and you have to breathe. Most people lose fights not because their techniques are not up to par, but they get exhausted. So that's why we're training all the time to stay vital, to keep moving. And so breathing and relaxing makes a huge difference. And that's under our conscious control. So many things aren't. What feelings are arising in the given moment is not under our conscious control. What thoughts are popping into our awareness, not under our conscious control. So we're not really responsible for what we can't control, but we can control what we do. And two things we can control is whether we're remembering to take a deep breath, like right now, and relaxing the body. And that breathe and relax can be an antidote to stress. Because can you imagine somebody in a stressful situation, but they're totally relaxed, they're breathing, and they're going, what a stressful situation this is. It's a whole different critter than being tense and uptight and holding your gut with stress. So staying relaxed. So that young man had no idea the bargain he just received. Here and now, breathe and relax. Lifetime practice.
In stressful times that I've had, and I've had a few, I agree. 3 breaths is the antidote. One trick I learned, and this is useful both for relaxation for me and also for keeping from getting out of breath during fighting, is to exhale before you inhale. Right. And normally people say, okay, everybody take a deep breath. And whenever I hear that, it's like, exhale, now take a deep breath. So
Right.
obviously you're making space for a deeper inhale. And so you'll get more breath, you'll get more oxygen if you do that. So before I'm running sprints, right before I take my first step on a sprint, I completely empty my lungs and then suck in oxygen and blast off. I think the magic really of breath and how that can calm your autonomic nervous system. I've also noted that all forms of spiritual practice or religion that I'm aware of have singing as part of it. And I note that when you are singing, you are engaging in a longer exhale. You know, singing involves a quick inhale and then a long, for whatever you're doing, inhale, long. And so I think there's something about singing or hymns or whatever. There's a reason those are in spiritual practices because they're extending your exhale. And there's
Right.
something about that long exhale that I think calms you. And of course, it makes space for an inhale.
That's a very good point. Very good point about how singing, the choir, being in a choir. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And also about exhaling first. When I go to the Y a couple of times a week, I do some weight machines and then I swim some laps. But I always do the last length of the pool underwater. And I do some relaxed breathing, make sure I've got no oxygen debt at the time. Then I make sure I exhale fully a couple times and then take a nice relaxed breath, not as much air as I can hold, because that entails tension. If we do that, if we go, there's pressure inside the body and it's tension. And so sufficiency is important, just breathing deeply enough. And then I go underwater and it's so relaxed. When I push off, I do a stroke, then I completely relax. Then I do a second stroke and completely relax. And after 10 strokes, I'm at the other side of the pool, 22 meters. And it always feels really peaceful.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I think there's something about swimming is an amazing exercise in general because it's so low impact on the body. And there's something about being in water that I just think is generally healing. I know that whenever I've had to recover from a knee injury or something like that, and I always advise my friends, basically, as soon as you can get into water, when the stitches are healed enough so there's no infection, it's the perfect resistance. You know, if you push lightly, you get light resistance. If you push hard, you get hard resistance. It's just water is an amazing thing. And the fact that you can combine it with controlling your breath, I think it's just a great exercise. And for anybody at any age, but certainly as we get older. Yes.
Well, there's conscious holding of breath, which I think can be good for us. They do that in yoga as well, kumbhaka, retention of breath, the various bandhas or locks, and they hold the breath for a certain amount of time. And in some martial arts, you learn to do that even to a point of a little bit of panic, and then hold it a little longer. Because if you're ever choked, you don't panic as much. And in fact, most people, if they're in a chokehold, it's not the idea of stopping the air, it's stopping the blood to your brain. So learning to relax and to move is important. But unconsciously holding our breath is not a good thing. And I'm only confronting that really, even though I've been teaching it for years, I'm only starting to confront it, how much I forget to do a pendular type breath in and out all day, breathing relaxed. Now, many people claim, come on, Dan, autonomic nervous system, you're going to breathe as much as you need to. But normally, because the mind imposes tension on the body, it tends to inhibit our breathing when we're doing a focused activity, playing a musical instrument or typing at a keyboard or pouring liquid into a glass. We tend to hold our breath. Taking a selfie, or when someone takes a picture of us, most people stop breathing and they smile, but they don't breathe. And so just remembering just to breathe throughout the day, like a pendulum, back and forth as much as possible. And in confronting that demand, I'm realizing how much that my breath is momentarily stopped, inhibited. And that's one of the major energy leaks in our lives, inhibited breathing. And the other is unnecessary tension. And so there you go, here and now, breathe and relax.
A couple of martial arts anecdotes came to my mind over the last few minutes of you talking. One is one of my coaches, Higan Machado. He would have us train really hard in jiu-jitsu, and if he saw, and he used to do this to me all the time, he could see how out of breath I was, and he would then have me lie down and place my gi, my heavy, sweaty, at that point, uniform over my face, which of course was created a feeling of claustrophobia
Oh, yeah.
in most people when you're trying to suck in oxygen, and now there's some heavy cloth that's been placed right over your
Right.
mouth.
Right.
But certainly with me at that time, and he did it, and he would just say, relax, relax, you'll be okay. And I remember I would be writhing, but my willpower would not let me take it off of my mouth, but I'd be writhing around in my arms. But it was really very useful, and he would do that to teach us that you don't need as much breath as you think you do sometimes. The other thing was you were talking about how our performance diminishes in sports when we're not breathing properly. And frankly, I'm sure it diminishes in intellectual activities as well. If we're not breathing well, we're probably not thinking well. Higgins' brother, Jean-Jacques Machado, another coach of mine, used to say everybody starts the fight as a black belt. I mean, he was talking to black belts. I was a black belt. But he said about 3 minutes in, you're a purple belt, which is a mid-range belt. And so what he was saying is no matter how good you are, once you start to tire, suddenly you're not so good anymore. And he was saying this in the context of getting me to both stay relaxed so I didn't get as tired, and to do my homework of getting my cardio up as much as possible, because you would have a distinct advantage later in the match if you are still a black belt and the person you're fighting is suddenly now a purple belt. You're very likely going to win the match. So it is true, the importance, I think, generally of being well oxygenated, let's just say. But there was something else that you brought up, which leads me to one other thing I'd like to discuss with you. By the way, we could talk forever, and feel free to cut us off, and I'm sure we could maybe make another time to talk if you like. But ego. This is something that I talk about a lot, and Obviously different people mean different things by ego. When I use the term ego, what I mean by it is that feeling of I am me, I am David, that self, but the kind of grabby ego, the I want to win, the jealous, I wish I had what you had, that sort of ego. And the reason I thought about it when you were talking is you had mentioned, like, if you didn't care about something, you wouldn't do it. And I deal with this in competition a lot. I've learned this paradox that you'll be more successful to win in competition, which of course is not in your control because there's another person and they might be better than you. That's a whole other discussion. But you'll be more successful if you don't care, right? Because if you care so much, you're going to be stressed, you're going to be really tense, you're not going to be fighting your normal game. And yet, if you don't care at all, you don't show up to the competition. So there's this balance of caring about something, but not caring so much that it becomes stressful. And I know I've used the term ego around you, and you've mentioned at times, hey, hold on there. Ego is not necessarily a bad thing. I would love what you think that term ego means, and what is the place of ego in our lives? Where is it good? Where is it bad?
Sure. Well, when Freud coined the term ego, that's where it came from pretty much, ego, id, superego, and all that. He just meant ich, I, an organizing principle of experience. Most of us identify with ourselves around our head because most of our senses, sight, sound, hearing, and so on, other than touch, which is all over the body, most of them are targeted in the head. But in the ancient times, people used to say, well, if they misbehaved, or they had a lack of integrity, or they said the devil made me do it. Well, today we're much more sophisticated. Now we go, oh my, that was my ego, as if it's separate from us. And really, I use my identity, this Dan Millman character, somewhat lightheartedly, but I use it to teach, to learn, and to serve. I'm not trying to get rid of my ego. I don't think we're here to get rid of a sense of self, or we end up kind of sitting around drooling, catatonic. I think we're here to transcend the ego. And there's a big difference. In a newborn, they don't have any sense of being a separate self at all. They're looking around at this mystery. When they have these pangs we call hunger, they don't know what that is, and they cry out, and then someone gives them a nipple or a bottle, whatever, and then they're satisfied for a little while. So the difference between a Zen master, you could call egoless or less ego, and an infant is, in the infant, the ego is still undeveloped, the sense of self, whereas in the Zen master, it's transcended, presumably. And yes, one can eventually transcend and see through and rise above this separate self, which compares itself to other people constantly. Am I better? Am I worse than them? See, I advise people against comparing themselves to anybody because they're going to either feel superior or inferior. And it's a profound disrespect for who you are, especially young people who, on social media, all their friends seem to be having a better time than they are, which is not really authentic because they just have better acts for the moment. When I was a young gymnastics teacher, I used to teach, among other things, on the trampoline, back somersaults. And I noticed that some people learned to back somersault more quickly than other people did. Maybe they had a better background or preparation. But I also noticed that those who took a little longer to learn it often learned it better than those who learned it quicker. So each of us needs to respect our own approach to learning, our own approach to living, to live our lives, not somebody else's. That's one of the aspects of what we call ego. Another is pride. Another is that competitive mind. Am I better or worse? Rather than collaborative mind. When you're rolling with someone on the mat, they're your teacher. They're your best teacher at that moment, right? So they're not your enemy. And as soon as they're your enemy or adversary, you're tense and you're trying to beat them and conquer them and all that stuff, rather than how can I flow? How can I do this? And you're teaching them too. So that's a bit of a roundabout answer to this whole idea of ego. But again, it's just a thing, not somebody to blame or to put down. By the way, you mentioned the sense of wanting to win. The more you want to win, the harder it is. There's a Taoist poem called The Need to Win. It goes like this: when an archer is shooting for nothing. He has all his skill. If he shoots for a brass buckle, he's already nervous. If he shoots for a prize of gold, he goes blind or sees two targets. He is out of his mind. His skill has not changed, but the prize divides him. He cares. He thinks more of winning than of shooting, and the need to win drains him of power. So that's a Taoist poem by Thomas Merton, The Way of Chuang Tzu. And that's why when we go in with a playful sense, even to the biggest competitions, when we're breathing and relaxed. By the way, I started with judo as a kid. Then I did some karate. Then I did some tai chi, Okinawa-te, and then some arnis kali eskrima from the Filipino arts. And one of the most interesting arts I studied was called Sistema. It's a Russian martial art developed over a long period of time. And there's a thing you can do called Watsu, which is a water massage, and you're completely relaxed. And they're just flowing you around, holding you by your ankles. And you can put a nose clip on, and they put you underwater. And
Yeah, someone is with you in a pool and they are supporting you so you can relax and they are moving you around in the pool.
exactly. And it sounds like a hippie trippy thing to do. But after doing this Watsu, the next week, I ended up going to a martial arts summer camp, a Sistema summer camp. We worked in the woods, we worked in open fields, and so on. But one of the last things we did was in the water up to our like chest in a lake. We practiced with a partner, throwing them over our shoulder and pushing them to the bottom of the 4 feet of water and then hitting them, just pounding on them underwater. Doesn't hurt really, you know. And these big guys that I was working with were panicking. But because I had done this Watsu, I was so relaxed, they were pulling me up saying, "Are you okay?" Because I thought you were unconscious. I said, "No, no, just put me back down," you know. Because this idea of being underwater, you mentioned water being beneficial, and practicing in that environment was really, really fun. And again, a playful attitude we can bring to all that we do.
I have a Watsu experience. I believe Watsu was developed up at Harbin Hot Springs in Northern California. And there was a person there who was a Watsu practitioner who's passed away. His name, as I knew him, was Sunheart Sunheart. That's his name. He probably needed to have a last name on a driver's license, so his name was Sunheart Sunheart. Extraordinary human being, lived up there, and he did a particular form of Watsu he called the dolphin dance. And this was a bit more energetic. So in general, Watsu is very relaxing and there may be stretching your limbs a little bit as they're floating you above the water. It's just an incredibly relaxing experience. But with the nose clip and stuff, he said, follow my breathing. And when he inhaled, I inhaled, and then he would take me underwater and he would dance me. And he was moving me like a dolphin would be underwater, above water. And I, again, would have thought this would have been a stressful experience, but he was holding me so confidently. It was an extraordinary experience. And then when it was done, after, I don't know, half an hour of just moving and flowing and breathing with my eyes closed and being under the water and above water, he was whispering in my ear, a new you, a new you. And that always stuck with me because taking us back to the beginning of our conversation, you can always be a new you, right? We were talking about choosing your life's purpose and recognizing that where you are today maybe isn't the person you were when you got out of college, if you went to college, something like that. But it really reminded me you're constantly reinventing yourself. And I would not have thought of myself as someone who would be partaking in some sort of odd water dolphin dance thing with a guy named Sunheart Sunheart. But it was extraordinary. I think, ego probably isn't a good enough word. I think people mean different things by it. A sense of self, like you say, without it, you'd be drooling in a corner, I think is a wonderful thing. I think wanting to accomplish things drives progress, drives good things. I see my mission in life is to cure people of the illusion of separateness from other living beings, which isn't to say we are not separate. We are separate. When we hang up, I'm going to have my day, you're going to have your day. If there's one apple and for some reason we don't want to split it. Either I'm going to eat it or you're going to eat it. I mean, there are things in life that are separate, but fundamentally, we are one people, we are one species, we are on one planet. Of course, as you know, I'm very much an advocate for animals. I extend that to other living beings to just understand that we're in this together. And so to me, that's both a breaking down of ego, of me understanding that I'm not as separate from you and every other living being as we think, and also understanding that my pride or my desire to win can be a motivator when properly channeled to do good things and to achieve. So I think, again, maybe it's a paradox, but that's my thought on that. I want to give you the last word. I want to be very respectful of your time. We could talk for hours, and I certainly hope we will get more chances to do that because I find you so enjoyable to speak to. And as I say in the show notes, there will be ways for people to contact you and access to all of your great materials that you've produced. Is there anything you'd like to share before I bid you a good morning or good afternoon where you are?
Well, this is a wonderful way to wrap up this topic of conversation, David. And it's always a pleasure speaking with you too. I always look forward to our meetings in Brooklyn, our meetups. Yes, I think we could say that some people, their sense of ego ends at their skin. Others, they expand it to their spouse. Others expand it to family or neighbors or friends or tribe or a city or nation or world. That's when it gets really beautiful. Or into the cosmos, into all living creatures. And so it's really expanding the sense of self rather than getting rid of it so we can embrace and encompass all that is. And maybe that's the idea of expanding. And with that, that's a wonderful way, I think, to close.
That's a beautiful thought, not getting rid of yourself, but expanding it. Brilliant. In the animal welfare world, we talk about expanding your circle of compassion. Exactly what you said. Most people take care of themselves, they take care of their loved ones, their kids. Expand your circle of compassion. You don't have to love an ant, but you don't have to kill them either.
Right.
Well, thank you, Dan. What a pleasure. I hope you have a wonderful day. I look forward to seeing you soon. And again, my most deep thanks for all that you've done for all these years for so many people. You will never know how many people you've helped, but I'm one of them, and thank you.
Oh, and you as well. We're each doing our part beautifully. Thank you, David. And until next time.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Dan Millman. He's a very interesting guy, as you saw, and I hope we'll get a chance to talk to him again. I particularly liked his thought of not getting rid of your ego, but rather expanding your ego. So what drives you to success and taking care of yourself also would then include taking care of others, both well beyond your family and into the world and the universe at large. I really like that concept. I also noted that he brought up independently the same concept that John Will, who we talked to a few weeks ago, also brought up, which was how in Japanese culture, attention to detail is very important, and how you do one thing, you do 10,000 things. So I thought that was quite interesting. You can find Dan's books and other really interesting material on his website at peacefulwarrior.com. The first book I ever read of his was Way of the Peaceful Warrior. So that's a great place to start. But he has many books that are really interesting that come from different angles of understanding life wisdom, and all of them are really excellent. If you enjoyed this podcast, please remember to subscribe, comment, like, and share. And if you're listening on Apple or Spotify podcasts, a review would really help us spread the word. I will be back next week with more lessons from the lab. And in the meantime, keep developing your strengths and your wisdom and go out and do good in the world.